When the lights dimmed and the music swelled in 2017, The Greatest Showman arrived with all the glitz and glamour of a Broadway musical. Featuring Hugh Jackman as P.T. Barnum, the film charmed audiences worldwide, offering a rags-to-riches story filled with bold performances and unforgettable songs. With tracks like This Is Me and Rewrite the Stars, the movie quickly became a global phenomenon, turning Barnum's rise to fame into a feel-good narrative of perseverance and self-acceptance. But as the curtain rises on the real story behind the film, what you might not know is that The Greatest Showman takes some creative liberties, obscuring some darker truths about its source material, Barnum's life, and the legacy he left behind. While the movie dazzles with color and emotion, the truth about P.T. Barnum's life is far less glamorous and far more controversial. The man known for creating the circus and becoming a figurehead of American show business wasn't always the hero portrayed in the film. Instead, his legacy includes questionable ethics, exploitation, and tactics that would make modern-day audiences cringe. This is the story of how the magic of The Greatest Showman may hide a much darker truth. Who was P.T. Barnum? P.T. Barnum was born in 1810 in Bethel, Connecticut, and became one of the most famous entrepreneurs in American history. He is best known for creating the Barnum and Bailey Circus, which would go on to be one of the most successful entertainment ventures in the world. However, the man celebrated in The Greatest Showman as a champion of outsiders, and the misunderstood was far less empathetic in real life. While the film presents Barnum as someone who defied societal expectations and gave his performers a platform, the historical Barnum was more concerned with making a profit than with offering dignity or respect to those he employed. Barnum's circus was founded on the concept of showcasing the unusual and bizarre. He turned people with physical deformities, disabilities, and peculiar traits into spectacles, displaying them to audiences for a fee. In this sense, Barnum's empowerment of these individuals, portrayed so romantically in the film, was mostly about profiting from their differences. The exploitation of freaks. One of the most glaring examples of Barnum's exploitation was his treatment of people with physical anomalies. The Greatest Showman introduces a diverse group of performers who, through their talents, find acceptance and purpose. In reality, however, Barnum's performers were often seen as little more than curiosities to be marketed for the sake of entertainment and profit. Many of his most famous acts, such as Tom Thumb, the smallest man in the world, and Charles Stratton, another dwarf who performed under the stage name, were presented not as human beings, but as exhibits in a human zoo. Take, for example, Joyce Heth, an elderly African-American woman who Barnum claimed was the 161-year-old nursemaid to George Washington. In truth, Heth was an elderly woman who Barnum paid to perform in a highly publicized spectacle. After her death, Barnum went so far as to display her corpse, charging people to view her remains in a macabre twist that would be considered highly unethical by today's standards. These freak shows formed the backbone of Barnum's circus, as he created an atmosphere where human beings were reduced to spectacle. While the movie emphasizes the importance of acceptance and the performer's abilities, it glosses over the fact that many of Barnum's so-called acts were treated as mere oddities for public amusement. The myth of the Swedish Nightingale. Another example of Barnum's manipulative tactics was his promotion of Jenny Lind, the Swedish opera singer known as the Swedish Nightingale. In The Greatest Showman, Barnum's pursuit of Lind is framed as an act of admiration for her talent and a means of giving her a platform in America. However, in reality, Barnum's involvement with Lind was far more transactional. He promoted Lind's tour in the United States, not out of a sense of artistry or appreciation, but because he saw her as a way to make money. Barnum's self-proclaimed Greatest Showman talents were fully on display here as he used her fame to generate large ticket sales. However, Lind was not impressed by Barnum's approach, and the two often clashed over finances. She ultimately rejected his inflated promises of wealth and fame, but Barnum, ever the marketer, continued to use her name to drive profit. Barnum's use of deception. Barnum was also notorious for using deception to create buzz around his exhibits. The most famous of these was the Fiji mermaid, a creature he claimed was a real mermaid, though it was later revealed to be a grotesque hoax, made by combining the body of a monkey with the tail of a fish. While the film presents Barnum as a visionary, the reality is that his success was built on misleading the public into believing in the extraordinary, even when those extraordinary claims were false. Barnum was not the first to use spectacle and lies for financial gain, but he did so with unparalleled skill. He was one of the first showmen to fully understand the power of marketing, and he knew how to keep audiences intrigued with sensationalized stories and over-the-top promises. This was the true secret to his success, a knack for creating intrigue, whether or not there was any truth behind it. The controversial legacy of Barnum's circus. Despite his controversial practices, Barnum's legacy endures in the form of the circus, which was eventually carried on by the Ringling Brothers. While The Greatest Showman doesn't touch on the full scope of his life, the truth is that Barnum had a lasting impact on American entertainment, both for better and for worse. His ability to bring together a diverse cast of performers, his genius in self-promotion, and his trailblazing role in the circus industry are undeniable achievements. However, his exploitation of vulnerable people, his tendency to mislead the public, and his disregard for ethics in pursuit of profit should not be overlooked. Barnum's political views were also complex. While he was known for his support of abolition and his role as a philanthropist later in life, these accomplishments don't erase the darker parts of his legacy. In his later years, Barnum shifted toward promoting temperance and supporting the anti-slavery movement, but these actions came after decades of exploiting marginalized individuals for profit. The movie suggests that Barnum was a great progressive force for good, but the reality is that his path to success was paved with manipulation, exploitation, and lies. Barnum's moral compromises. Barnum's success was built not just on his exploitation of performers, but also on his ability to manipulate the public. His skill in marketing, storytelling, and public relations was legendary, but it was often tied to morally dubious practices. For example, Barnum was known to promote shows that promised the impossible, like his famous mermaid exhibit, just to keep the public intrigued and coming back for more. Beyond the circus, Barnum's business tactics involved using deceitful advertising and exaggeration to attract customers. He once used the press to fabricate stories about his exhibitions, turning minor incidents into grand tales that sparked public interest. It was this kind of manipulation of both the public and his performers that allowed Barnum to amass wealth and fame. The political side of Barnum's legacy. While The Greatest Showman celebrates Barnum as a figure of progress and change, his political views were far more complicated. Later in life, Barnum became a philanthropist and politician, supporting causes such as the abolition of slavery and advocating for women's rights. However, these actions came after decades of exploitation, and many historians argue that Barnum's philanthropy was more a matter of convenience than true moral conviction. Barnum's involvement in politics, particularly his tenure as a U.S. congressman, was marked by contradictory views. He supported abolition, but his support was often seen as more about political gain than genuine empathy for the enslaved. Why the myth persists. So why does Barnum's myth endure despite his questionable ethics? The answer lies in the fact that Barnum was, in many ways, the quintessential American showman. His legacy, while tarnished by exploitation, also represents the American drive to succeed against all odds. His ability to reinvent himself, his innovative marketing strategies, and his contributions to the circus and entertainment industries are undeniable. The Greatest Showman is part of this myth, offering a polished, feel-good version of Barnum's rise to power. The real story, however, is much more complicated. Barnum's journey to fame was not just about embracing the strange and extraordinary. It was also about profiting from deception and exploitation. While The Greatest Showman continues to be a cinematic sensation, it's important to remember that behind the dazzling lights and soaring songs, the true story of P.T. Barnum is much darker than Hollywood would have you believe. The movie may present a man who embraced diversity and offered a voice to the voiceless, but the reality is that Barnum was a businessman first, using manipulation, exploitation, and deceit to build his empire. As we continue to enjoy the film, we must also acknowledge the truth behind the legend and recognize that the story of Barnum is far more complicated than the one the movie tells. In the end, the magic of the circus, like the magic of Hollywood, is about creating a world of wonder. But beneath that glittering surface, the darker realities of power, manipulation, and exploitation should never be forgotten. The movie may leave us feeling uplifted, but the real story of P.T. Barnum is a reminder that the pursuit of success can sometimes come at a great moral cost.